If I ever write a memoir, it'll be called How to Fix Everything Except Your Marriage. The irony isn't lost on me that I can calculate load-bearing capacities for 50-story buildings, but I couldn't see the structural damage in my own home until it was too late. Before we dive deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible Reddit stories. My name is Adrian Falk. I'm 42, a structural planner for a mid-sized engineering firm in suburban Boston. I fix things for a living: bridges, buildings, foundations that keep people safe. What I couldn't fix was the growing distance between my wife Janelle and me, or the way she'd started looking right through me like I was just another piece of furniture in our perfectly maintained colonial home. The night everything changed started like any other Tuesday in March. Gray skies, that persistent New England chill that makes you wonder if spring is just a cruel joke. I was under the kitchen sink, wrestling with a pipe that had been dripping for weeks, when I heard Janelle's car pull into the driveway. The engine shut off, but she didn't come in right away. Through the window, I could see her silhouette in the driver's seat, phone pressed to her ear, laughing at something I couldn't hear. When she finally walked through the door, she brought that familiar cloud of expensive perfume and nervous energy that had become her signature lately. Her auburn hair was perfectly styled despite the long day, and she wore that black dress I'd always loved, the one she used to save for special occasions with me. "Working late again?" I asked, sliding out from under the sink with a wrench in my hand. "Client dinner," she said, without looking at me, already heading for the stairs. "You know how it is with the Henderson wedding. Every detail has to be perfect." I knew how it was, all right. Janelle ran her own event planning business, and lately, it seemed like every client needed her personal attention well into the evening hours. The Henderson wedding had been her excuse for the past 3 weeks. "How's the pipe?" she asked, pausing at the bottom of the stairs. "Fixed," I said. "Unlike some things." She gave me that look, the one that said I was being dramatic, that my blue-collar sensibilities couldn't understand the sophisticated demands of her work. "I'm exhausted, Adrian. Can we not do this tonight?" I wanted to ask her when we could do this, when we could talk like we used to, laugh like we used to, touch each other like we meant it. Instead, I just nodded and watched her disappear upstairs, her heels clicking against the hardwood like a countdown timer. An hour later, I found it. I was getting ready for bed when I saw the watch on my nightstand, a sleek, expensive-looking piece with a leather band and gold accents. Definitely not mine. I wear a $20 Timex that survived more construction sites than I care to count. "Janelle," I called toward the bathroom, where she was going through her elaborate skincare routine. "There's a watch here." She appeared in the doorway, face half covered in some kind of cream mask. "Oh, that. My coworker dropped it at work today. I told him I'd return it tomorrow." "Expensive coworker," I said, picking up the watch. The weight of it felt substantial, real, the kind of watch that cost more than most people's monthly mortgage. "Martin's always been flashy," she said, disappearing back into the bathroom. "You know how these corporate types are?" Martin Kessler. I'd heard the name before, Janelle's supervisor at the event planning firm where she'd been working part-time for the past 6 months. According to her, he was helping her expand her client base, introducing her to the kind of high-end customers who could afford her premium services. I set the watch back down and tried to ignore the voice in my head that was asking why a coworker would drop his expensive watch at Janelle's workplace and why she'd bring it home instead of just leaving it on his desk. But the voice got louder over the next few days. Wednesday morning, Janelle was up early, spending an unusual amount of time on her hair and makeup for what she said was a planning session with Martin. Thursday, she came home with a new perfume, something French and expensive that she claimed was a gift from a grateful client. Friday, I noticed she'd started keeping her phone face down during dinner, and when it buzzed with notifications, she'd flip it over just long enough to read them before turning it back down. The weekend was worse. She spent Saturday afternoon reviewing contracts at a coffee shop downtown, and Sunday she had an emergency consultation that lasted until nearly midnight. When she came home, her hair was mussed and her lipstick was gone, but she claimed she'd been dealing with a bridezilla who'd had a complete meltdown about centerpieces. By Monday, I'd made my decision. If there's one thing my job has taught me, it's that when you suspect structural damage, you don't ignore it and hope for the best. You investigate. You gather evidence. You make sure you understand the full scope of the problem before you decide how to fix it. That's when I called my sister, Cassie. Cassie runs a boxing gym in Southie, the kind of place where cops and firefighters go to blow off steam. She's 3 years younger than me, but twice as street smart, with the kind of sharp instincts that come from growing up in a neighborhood where you learn to read people or you got hurt. "You want to do what?" she asked when I explained my plan over coffee at a diner near her gym. "Install a camera," I said, "just to know for sure." "Adrian, if you're at the point where you're considering spying on your wife, the marriage is already over." "Maybe," I said, "but I need to know what I'm dealing with. If she's cheating, I want evidence before I confront her. If she's not," I shrugged, "then I'll know I'm being paranoid, and we can work on whatever's really wrong." Cassie studied me across the table, her dark eyes serious. "And if you find what you think you're going to find? Then I'll deal with it." She was quiet for a long moment, stirring sugar into her coffee. Finally, she nodded. "There's a guy I know. Does security installations for the gym. He can set you up with something small, wireless. But Adrian, once you see it, you can't unsee it." "I know." The camera arrived Wednesday afternoon, disguised in a package from an office supply company. It was smaller than I'd expected, about the size of a button, designed to look like part of a picture frame. The guy Cassie recommended had included detailed instructions and a phone app that would let me monitor the feed remotely. I installed it Thursday evening, while Janelle was at what she called a vendor meeting. The irony wasn't lost on me that I was using the same careful attention to detail that made me good at my job to potentially destroy my marriage. Friday, I worked a late shift, checking bridge foundations on the outskirts of the city. It was the kind of work that usually cleared my head, methodical, precise, with clear right and wrong answers. But that night, all I could think about was the camera waiting in my bedroom and what it might show me. I got home around 11:30 to find the house dark and Janelle's car in the driveway. She was already in bed, or pretending to be, curled up on her side with her back to my side of the bed. "How was work?" she mumbled when I slipped under the covers. "Fine," I said. "Long day." She said, and within minutes her breathing had settled into the rhythm of sleep. I lay there in the dark, staring at the ceiling, knowing that the camera was recording everything, knowing that tomorrow I'd have to decide whether to look at what it had captured. I didn't sleep much that night. Saturday morning, Janelle was up early again, moving around the bedroom with that nervous energy I'd come to recognize. She showered, did her hair, put on makeup, all for what she said was a site visit for an upcoming corporate event. "I'll probably be gone most of the day," she said, checking her reflection in the dresser mirror. "Martin wants to walk through the venue personally, make sure we understand the client's vision." "On a Saturday?" I asked. "You know how it is," she said, not meeting my eyes. "The client's only available on weekends." After she left, I sat in my kitchen with a cup of coffee and my phone, the camera app icon staring back at me like a loaded gun. For 20 minutes, I just sat there, thumb hovering over the screen. Finally, I opened it. The feed was crystal clear, showing our empty bedroom in real time. I scrolled back through the recorded footage, past the morning routine, past the night before, looking for... I found it at 2:47 p.m. on Friday. The bedroom door opened and Janelle walked in, but she wasn't alone. The man behind her was tall, well-dressed, with the kind of silver hair and confident posture that screamed money and authority. He was older than me, probably mid-40s, wearing an expensive suit and that same watch I'd found on my nightstand. Martin Kessler. What happened next was worse than any nightmare I could have imagined. They weren't just having an affair, they were comfortable with it. Familiar. The way they moved around my bedroom, the casual intimacy between them, told me this had been going on for much longer than I'd suspected. But the worst part wasn't what they did, it was what they said. "Adrian working late again?" Martin asked, loosening his tie. "Bridge inspection," Janelle said, laughing. "He'll be gone for hours. You know how he gets with his little projects." "Your husband the hero," Martin said, and there was mockery in his voice. "Keeping the city safe with his working man hands." "Don't," Janelle said, but she was smiling. "He's a good man, just predictable." "Boring, you mean?" "I didn't say that." "You didn't have to." I watched my wife, the woman I'd loved for 15 years, the woman I'd built a life with, laugh at Martin's joke about my predictable routine. I watched her complain about how I never understood the sophisticated demands of her work, how I was content with my simple job while she had bigger ambitions. I watched them in my bed, in my house, mocking everything I'd thought we'd built together. When it was over, I sat in my kitchen for a long time, staring at my phone. The rational part of my brain was already working, calculating what I needed to do next. Evidence, documentation, legal strategy. But underneath the cold planning, something else was building, something that felt like the moment when a structure finally gives way under too much pressure, a sudden, catastrophic failure that changes everything. By the time Janelle came home that evening, full of stories about her site visit and how demanding Martin was as a supervisor, I'd made my decision. I was going to destroy them both. But first, I needed more evidence. The next 2 weeks were the longest of my life. Every morning, I'd wake up next to Janelle and pretend everything was normal. I'd make coffee, ask about her day, kiss her goodbye like I had for 15 years. And every evening, I'd review the footage from the camera, documenting each lie, each betrayal, each moment of intimacy that belonged to me but had been given to someone else. They met in my bedroom 4 more times over those 2 weeks. Always on days when I was scheduled to work late, always with the same casual disregard for my existence. I learned that Martin was married. His wife Alyssa was apparently frigid and controlling, according to his pillow talk with my wife. I learned that Janelle had been planning to ask for a divorce when the timing was right, which apparently meant when she'd figured out how to take half of everything I'd worked for while keeping her relationship with her boss intact. Most importantly, I learned that I wasn't the first. "Remember David from the Morrison wedding?" Janelle said during one of their sessions, referring to a client from 2 years ago. "He was sweet, but so intense, always wanting to leave his wife, make it official." "What happened to him?" Martin asked. "I ended it when he got too clingy. Some men can't handle keeping things simple." The casual way she said it, like she was discussing the weather, told me everything I needed to know about who I'd really married. But the camera was just the beginning of my investigation. I started small. I called the office building where Janelle claimed to work and asked to speak with Martin Kessler. The receptionist told me he was the senior partner at Kessler and Associates, a high-end event planning firm that specialized in corporate events and society weddings. She also mentioned, helpfully, that Mr. Kessler was married to Alyssa Kessler, who occasionally helped with the business. I drove by their office building one afternoon, a sleek glass tower in downtown Boston that probably cost more per month in rent than I made in a year. Through the floor-to-ceiling windows, I could see an open-concept workspace with modern furniture and beautiful people in expensive clothes. It was exactly the kind of environment that would appeal to Janelle's ambitions. I also started paying attention to our finances. Janelle had always handled most of our banking, claiming she was better with money than I was. What I found when I started looking closely made me freeze. Over the past 6 months, She'd been slowly moving money out of our joint accounts and into a personal account I didn't know existed. Small amounts at first, a few hundred here and there that could be explained as business expenses. But in the past month, the transfers had gotten larger and more frequent. She was planning her exit strategy. The realization hit me like a physical blow. This wasn't just an affair, it was a calculated dismantling of our life together. While I'd been working overtime to pay for the house renovations she'd insisted on, she'd been preparing to take half of everything and start over with her rich boss. That's when I called my lawyer. Tom Bradley had handled the legal work when we'd bought our house, and I'd stayed in touch with him over the years. He was a straight shooter, the kind of guy who'd grown up in the same working-class neighborhood I had, and understood what it meant to build something from nothing. "Jesus, Adrian," he said, after I'd explained the situation. "How long has this been going on?" "At least 6 months," I said. "Maybe longer." "And you have video evidence?" "Hours of it. Plus financial records showing she's been moving money without my knowledge." Tom was quiet for a moment. "Okay, here's what we're going to do. First, you're going to download everything, all the footage, all the financial records, everything. Make multiple copies and store them somewhere safe. Second, you're going to document every lie she tells you from now on. Keep a journal with dates and times." "What about confronting her?" "Not yet. If she knows you're onto her, she'll accelerate whatever timeline she's working on. We need to make sure we have everything documented before she has a chance to cover her tracks." "And then?" "Then we make sure she doesn't get to rewrite history. In Massachusetts, adultery can affect the division of assets, especially if we can prove she was planning to leave and take you for everything you're worth." I hung up feeling like I had a plan, but also like I was living in someone else's life. 3 weeks ago, my biggest worry had been a leaky pipe. Now I was planning legal warfare against the woman I'd loved for half my adult life. But I wasn't done gathering intelligence. The breakthrough came from an unexpected source, Mara Hendricks, a junior associate at Janelle's firm who I'd met at a few office parties. She was young, ambitious, and apparently not as fond of Martin Kessler as she pretended to be. I ran into her at a coffee shop near their office building, not entirely by accident since I'd been watching their routines for weeks. She recognized me immediately. "Adrian, how are you? How's Janelle?" "She's good," I said. "Working hard as always. Actually, I was hoping to surprise her with lunch, but I can't remember which client site she's visiting today." Mara's expression shifted slightly. "Client site? She's in the office today. Has been all morning." "Really? She told me she had an off-site meeting with the Henderson wedding people." "The Hendersons?" Mara looked confused. "That wedding was last month. Beautiful event, but it's been over for weeks." I felt that familiar cold rage building in my chest, but I kept my voice casual. "Huh? Maybe I misunderstood. You know how it is with all these different clients." "Yeah," Mara said, but she was studying my face now. "Listen, Adrian, can I ask you something? How well do you know Martin?" "Not well. Why?" She glanced around the coffee shop, then leaned closer. "This is probably none of my business, but he's not a good guy. I mean, he's charming and successful, but he's also married and has a reputation for, well, for getting involved with employees." "What kind of reputation?" "The kind where young women get hired, get close to him, and then suddenly find themselves looking for new jobs when things go south. I've seen it happen 3 times since I started working there." "And Janelle?" Mara was quiet for a long moment. "Janelle's different. She's not some naive kid fresh out of college. She knows exactly what she's doing." The words hit me like a punch to the gut, but they also confirmed what I'd already suspected. Janelle wasn't a victim in this situation. She was a willing participant, maybe even the instigator. "Why are you telling me this?" I asked. "Because you seem like a decent guy, and because Martin Kessler thinks he's untouchable. Maybe it's time someone proved him wrong." That conversation changed everything. I wasn't just dealing with a cheating wife anymore. I was dealing with a pattern of behavior that had probably destroyed other marriages and other lives. And according to Mara, Martin had never faced any real consequences for his actions. That night, I sat in my home office, surrounded by printed photos from the camera footage, financial records, and pages of notes documenting every lie Janelle had told me over the past month. It looked like the kind of evidence board you'd see in a police procedural, except instead of solving a murder, I was solving the end of my marriage. But as I stared at all that evidence, I realized something important. I didn't just want a divorce anymore. I wanted justice. Martin Kessler had built his life on the assumption that he could take whatever he wanted without consequences. He'd destroyed other relationships, other families, and now he was destroying mine. He thought his money and position made him untouchable. He was about to learn how wrong he was. And Janelle, the woman who'd promised to love and honor me, who'd shared my bed and my dreams and my trust for 15 years, she'd made her choice. She'd chosen to betray everything we'd built together for a chance at a more exciting life with a richer man. Now she was going to live with the consequences of that choice. I opened my laptop and started typing. The first email was to Martin's wife, Alyssa. The second was to the HR department at Kessler and Associates. The third was to Janelle's biggest client, a society matron who valued discretion and propriety above all else. But before I sent them, I had one more piece of business to take care of. I picked up my phone and called Cassie. "I need your help," I said when she answered. "What kind of help?" "The kind that's going to make sure everyone knows exactly who Martin Kessler really is." There was a pause. Then, "I'll be right over." The plan was simple, elegant, and completely legal. 3 things that appealed to both my engineering mindset and my desire for revenge that wouldn't land me in prison. Cassie arrived an hour later with a bottle of whiskey and a grim smile. "Show me what we're working with," she said. I laid out everything: the footage, the financial records, the timeline of lies, and the information Mara had given me about Martin's history with other employees. Cassie reviewed it all with the methodical attention of someone who'd spent years sizing up opponents in the boxing ring. "This guy's a predator," she said finally. "And your wife?" She shook her head. "I'm sorry, Adrian. I know you loved her." "I loved who I thought she was," I said. "Turns out that person never existed." "So what's the plan?" "Controlled demolition," I said. "When you're bringing down a damaged structure, you don't just swing a wrecking ball and hope for the best. You study the weak points, you place your charges strategically, and you make sure the whole thing comes down at once so it can't hurt anyone else. And their weak points are Martin's marriage, his business reputation, and his assumption that he's too important to face consequences. Janelle's client relationships, her financial security, and her belief that she can rewrite history to make herself the victim. We worked until 3 a.m, crafting emails, gathering contact information, and timing everything for maximum impact. The beauty of the plan was that we weren't doing anything illegal or even unethical. We were simply making sure the truth reached the people who deserved to know it. The first phase launched Monday morning. At 9 a.m., Alyssa Kessler received an email with the subject line, "From one betrayed spouse to another." The message was brief and professional, explaining who I was and why I thought she deserved to know what her husband was doing. I attached selected footage that clearly showed Martin in my bedroom, along with timestamps and dates. At 9:15 a.m., the HR department at Kessler and Associates received a formal complaint about Martin's relationship with a subordinate contractor, complete with documentation and evidence of policy violations. At 9:30 a.m., Margaret Whitmore, Janelle's most prestigious client and a woman who'd built her reputation on running scandal-free charity events, received an anonymous tip about her event planner's unprofessional conduct with business partners. At 10 a.m., I sent copies of all the financial records to my lawyer, officially documenting Janelle's attempts to hide assets before filing for divorce. Then I sat back and waited. The first crack in their perfect little world came at 11:30 a.m. when my phone rang. "Adrian?" Janelle's voice was shaky, panicked. "Can you come home? Something's happened." "What kind of something?" "Just, please, I need you here." I found her in our living room, still in her pajamas, staring at her laptop screen with the kind of expression you see on people who've just watched their house burn down. Her phone was buzzing constantly with calls and messages she wasn't answering. "What's wrong?" I asked, though I already knew. "Someone sent Margaret Whitmore photos," she said without looking up. "Photos of me and Martin. She's threatening to cancel her contract and tell everyone in her social circle that we're having an affair." She looked up at me then, and I saw the exact moment she realized I already knew. Her face went through a series of expressions: surprise, fear, calculation, and finally, a kind of desperate defiance. "How long have you known?" she asked. "Long enough?" "Adrian, I can explain." "Can you? Because I'd love to hear how you explain this." I pulled out my phone and played a clip from the camera footage, just the audio, but it was enough. Her voice, clear as day, talking about my predictable routine and working man hands, while she and Martin laughed about how easy it was to deceive me. The color drained from her face. "You've been spying on me." "I've been documenting the truth. There's a difference." "This is illegal. You can't record people without their consent." "Actually, I can. This is my house, and in Massachusetts, I only need one-party consent for recordings. Since I'm the one who installed the camera, I'm the consenting party." She stared at me like she was seeing a stranger. Maybe she was. The man she'd married wouldn't have had the stomach for this kind of calculated revenge, but that man had faded the first time she brought Martin Kessler into our bedroom. "What do you want?" she asked finally. "I want you to pack a bag and leave, today." "This is my house, too." "No, it's not. Check the deed. The house is in my name only, purchased with money I earned before we were married and improved with my labor over the past 15 years. You have no legal claim to it." "You can't just throw me out." "I'm not throwing you out. I'm asking you to leave voluntarily. If you refuse, I'll call the police and have you removed for trespassing. Your choice." Her phone buzzed again, and she glanced at it. From the look on her face, I could tell the news was getting worse. "That's Martin, isn't it?" I asked. "Let me guess. His wife found out too?" "How could you do this?" she whispered. "How could you destroy everything?" "I didn't destroy anything, Janelle. You did that the first time you decided our marriage vows were just suggestions." She was crying now, but they weren't tears of remorse. They were tears of frustration and rage. She was angry that she'd been caught, angry that her carefully laid plans were falling apart, angry that the husband she'd dismissed as predictable had outmaneuvered her. "I never meant for it to happen," she said. Martin understood me in a way you never did. He saw my potential, my ambitions. He made me feel like I could be more than just a small-town housewife. So you decided to blow up our marriage for a married man who's probably said the exact same things to half a dozen other women? It wasn't like that, wasn't it? Because according to my source at your office, you're not Martin's first affair. You're just the latest in a long line of women who thought they were special. The look of shock on her face told me she hadn't known about Martin's history. For all her calculating manipulation, she'd been as naive as any of his previous victims when it came to believing she was different. "You're lying," she said, but there was uncertainty in her voice. "Ask Mara Hendricks. Better yet, ask Martin. I'm sure he'll be happy to explain his track record while he's dealing with his own divorce proceedings." Her phone rang again. This time she answered it. "Martin? What's happening? I got a call from Margaret and she's—" She stopped, listening. I could hear his voice through the phone, loud and angry, though I couldn't make out the words. "What do you mean, suspended?" she said. "They can't just—" More angry words from Martin. Well, what are we going to do? My clients are… She looked at me, and I smiled. Martin? She said into the phone. Martin, are you there? She stared at the phone for a moment, then looked up at me. He hung up. Probably busy dealing with his own problems. Turns out when you build your life on lies and betrayal, it all comes crashing down pretty quickly once the truth gets out. You've destroyed both of us. I've exposed both of you. There's a difference. She sat there for a long moment, phone in her lap, staring at the ruins of her carefully constructed double life. When she finally spoke, her voice was small and defeated. What happens now? Now you pack a bag and find somewhere else to stay while we figure out the divorce. My lawyer will be in touch with whatever legal representation you can afford. And if I refuse to leave? I pulled out my phone and started dialing. Then I call the police and show them the footage of you bringing another man into my house without my knowledge or consent. In Massachusetts, that's criminal trespass, and given the circumstances, I think they'll be very interested in hearing the whole story. She held up a hand. Wait, I'll pack a bag. It took her 2 hours to gather what she needed. I watched from the kitchen as she moved through our house like a ghost, taking clothes and personal items, but leaving behind 15 years of shared memories, photo albums, wedding gifts, the furniture we'd picked out together. All of it stayed, because all of it belonged to a life she'd chosen to destroy. When she was done, she stood in the doorway with 2 suitcases, looking smaller and more fragile than I'd seen her in years. I did love you, she said. At the beginning, I really did. I know, I said, but love isn't enough when you don't have respect, and you lost respect for me a long time ago. So what now? You get your revenge and I lose everything? You made your choices, Janelle. Now you get to live with the consequences. She nodded slowly, then walked out the door and out of my life. But my revenge was just getting started. The next 3 weeks were like watching a controlled demolition in slow motion. Every day brought new developments as the truth spread through Martin and Janelle's professional and social circles like a virus, infecting everything it touched. Martin was the first to fall. Within 48 hours of Alyssa receiving my email, he'd been suspended from his position at Kessler and Associates pending an internal investigation. By the end of the week, the investigation had uncovered a pattern of inappropriate relationships with female employees and contractors that went back years. The company's insurance carrier threatened to drop their coverage if Martin remained in any leadership position, and the board of directors, which included several prominent Boston society figures, voted unanimously to remove him. Alyssa filed for divorce the following Monday, citing adultery and seeking full custody of their 2 teenage children. She also froze all their joint accounts and moved to exclude Martin from their Beacon Hill townhouse. According to the society pages, which covered the scandal with barely concealed glee, Martin was staying in a hotel downtown while his lawyer tried to negotiate some kind of settlement. But the professional consequences were just the beginning. Margaret Whitmore didn't just cancel her contract with Janelle, she made sure everyone in Boston's social elite knew exactly why. Within days, Janelle had lost 3 more high-profile clients, and the ripple effect was devastating. In the event planning business, reputation is everything, and Janelle's reputation was now radioactive. I learned all this from Mara, who had become an unexpected ally in my campaign for justice. She called me regularly with updates from inside Kessler and Associates, where the atmosphere had apparently become toxic as employees chose sides and tried to distance themselves from the scandal. Martin's been trying to blame everything on Janelle, Mara told me during one of our coffee meetings. He's telling anyone who'll listen that she seduced him, that he was the victim of an aggressive subordinate who threatened to make false accusations if he didn't give her business. Is anyone buying it? The board isn't. They found emails between Martin and at least 3 other women over the past 5 years. Same pattern every time. He'd promise them business opportunities, start an affair, then dump them when they got too demanding or when he found someone new. What about Janelle? She's trying to salvage what she can of her client base, but it's not going well. Word is she's thinking about leaving Boston entirely, starting over somewhere else. That conversation gave me an idea for the final phase of my plan. I'd been documenting everything, every lie Janelle had told me, every financial transaction she'd hidden, every piece of evidence that showed her calculated betrayal of our marriage. But I hadn't used all of it yet. I'd been saving the most damaging material for when it would have maximum impact. The opportunity came when Janelle's lawyer contacted mine with a proposed settlement. Despite everything that had happened, she was still trying to claim half of our marital assets, including half the value of the house and half of my retirement savings. Her lawyer was arguing that the affair was a temporary lapse in judgment that shouldn't affect the financial settlement. That's when I decided to show them exactly how temporary and how much of a lapse in judgment it really was. The meeting was scheduled for a Thursday afternoon at my lawyer's office. Janelle arrived looking polished and professional, like she was playing the role of the wronged wife rather than the cheating spouse. Her lawyer was a sharp-dressed woman who specialized in high-conflict divorces and had a reputation for getting favorable settlements for her clients. "Mr. Falk," Janelle's lawyer began, "my client is prepared to be reasonable about this division of assets, but she's not going to be punished financially for what was essentially a brief emotional affair that's already ended." "Brief?" I said. "Emotional?" Tom Bradley, my lawyer, slid a thick folder across the table. "Before we discuss any settlement, you should review this material." The folder contained everything. Financial records showing Janelle had been systematically moving money for 6 months. Screenshots of text messages between her and Martin discussing their future together and their plans to handle their respective divorces. Photos and video stills that made it clear this was far from an emotional affair. It was a calculated relationship that had been going on for much longer than anyone had admitted. But the most damaging evidence was something I'd discovered just the week before. Janelle had been using our joint credit cards to pay for hotel rooms, expensive dinners, and gifts for Martin. She'd been financing her affair with my money while lying to my face about working late. Janelle's lawyer reviewed the material in silence, her expression growing grimmer with each page. When she was done, she looked at her client with barely concealed disgust. "You told me this was a brief affair," she said. "You told me there was no financial component." "It was complicated," Janelle said weakly. "You used marital funds to finance an affair with your supervisor while systematically hiding assets from your husband. That's not complicated. That's fraud." The settlement negotiation lasted less than an hour after that. Faced with evidence of financial misconduct and a pattern of deception that went back months, Janelle's lawyer advised her to accept whatever terms I was willing to offer rather than risk a trial that would expose even more damaging information. In the end, Janelle walked away with her personal belongings and enough money to cover her immediate expenses. Everything else, the house, the retirement accounts, the investments I'd made over 15 years of marriage, stayed with me. She also had to reimburse me for the money she'd spent on her affair, which came to just over $8,000. But the financial settlement was just the beginning of her problems. 2 weeks later, I got a call from Detective Sarah Chen of the Boston Police Department's Financial Crimes Unit. Apparently, Margaret Whitmore hadn't just canceled her contract with Janelle. She'd also filed a complaint alleging that Janelle had overbilled her for services and used her event as a cover for personal meetings with Martin Kessler. "We're not talking about criminal charges at this point," Detective Chen explained. "But Mrs. Whitmore is a prominent citizen, and when prominent citizens file complaints, we have to investigate. I was hoping you might be able to provide some background on your ex-wife's business practices." I was happy to help. I provided the detective with copies of all the financial records, including evidence of how Janelle had been billing clients for time she was actually spending on personal activities. I also shared the footage that showed her bringing Martin to our house during times when she was supposed to be working on client events. The investigation didn't result in criminal charges, but it did result in something almost as damaging: a formal complaint filed with the Better Business Bureau and the state licensing board that regulated event planners. Between the professional sanctions and the ongoing gossip in Boston's tight-knit social circles, Janelle's career in the city was effectively over. The final piece of my revenge came from an unexpected source. 3 weeks after the divorce was finalized, I got a call from Kessler. Martin's ex-wife had heard about my role in exposing the affair and wanted to meet for coffee. "I wanted to thank you," she said when we sat down at a cafe in Back Bay. "I knew Martin was cheating. I'd suspected it for years, but I could never prove it. What you did gave me the evidence I needed to protect myself and my children." "How are you holding up?" "Better than I expected. It turns out Martin wasn't as smart about hiding assets as he thought he was. My lawyer found 3 different accounts he'd been using to hide money from me. Between that and the adultery evidence you provided, I'm getting a very favorable settlement." "And Martin?" Alyssa smiled, and there was something cold and satisfied in her expression. "Martin is learning that when you burn bridges, sometimes you can't find your way back across the river. He's been blacklisted from most of the major event planning firms in the city, and his reputation in our social circle is completely destroyed. Last I heard, he was looking at jobs in other cities, but word travels fast in our industry." "What about Janelle?" "Gone. Left Boston about a week ago. I heard she's moving back to Ohio where her family lives, starting over with a new name and a new business plan." We sat in comfortable silence for a moment, 2 people who'd been betrayed by the same man and had found a way to get justice. "Can I ask you something?" Alyssa said finally. "Do you regret it, the way you handled everything?" I thought about that question for a long time. Did I regret destroying my wife's career and reputation? Did I regret exposing Martin's pattern of predatory behavior? Did I regret fighting back instead of just quietly accepting their betrayal? "No," I said finally. "I don't regret it at all." "Good," Alyssa said. "Because people like them count on people like us being too decent to fight back. They count on us accepting their betrayal and moving on quietly while they get to keep everything they stole from us." "And now?" "Now they know that actions have consequences. And maybe the next time Martin Kessler thinks about destroying someone's marriage, he'll remember what happened when he destroyed ours." 6 months later, I was sitting in my kitchen, in my house, surrounded by the life I'd built with my own hands, when Cassie called with an update. "Thought you'd want to know," she said. "I heard through the grapevine that Martin Kessler got arrested last week." "For what?" "DUI. Apparently, he's been drinking heavily since the divorce, and last Tuesday, he wrapped his car around a tree in Newton. Nobody was hurt, but his alcohol was twice the legal limit." "And Janelle?" "Still in Ohio, as far as I know. Word is she's working as a waitress while she tries to rebuild her event planning business, but it's not going well. Turns out her reputation followed her." After I hung up, I sat in my kitchen for a long time, thinking about justice and revenge and the difference between the two. For 15 years, I'd been the kind of man who fixed things quietly, who solved problems without making waves, who believed that if you worked hard and treated people fairly, life would treat you fairly in return. But sometimes life doesn't work that way. Sometimes people take your fairness for weakness, your trust for stupidity, your love for granted. And sometimes the only way to fix what's broken is to tear it down completely and start over. I'd lost my marriage, but I'd kept my self-respect. I'd lost the woman I thought I loved, but I'd learned who she really was. And I'd made sure that Martin Kessler and Janelle Falk would never again be able to destroy someone's life without facing consequences. That night, I slept better than I had in months. In the morning, I'd go back to work, building bridges and fixing foundations, doing the quiet, important work that keeps the world stable and safe. But I'd never again be the kind of man who could be taken advantage of without fighting back. Some structures, once they're damaged beyond repair, need to be demolished completely before you can build something new. My marriage had been one of those structures. And now, finally, I was ready to start building again.